Buongiorno wine lovers. Welcome to Wine by the Class, where we journey through the diverse and captivating world of regional Italian wines. Italy boasts a rich tapestry of terroirs, grape varietals, and winemaking traditions, from the rolling hills of Tuscany to the sun-drenched vineyards of Sicily. Join me as we uncork the stories behind these exceptional wines, exploring their unique characteristics, food pairings, and the passionate people who craft them. Prepare your palate for an unforgettable experience as we delve into the heart of Italian wine country, one region at a time. Our wine expert, Anthony Vidoni, will guide us. He is a passionate and knowledgeable Italian wine expert with over 50 years of experience, the author of several books, and a deep appreciation for Italy's rich history and diverse wines. Please join me in welcoming Anthony, who will be our guide on this vinous adventure.
I'm going to start off by wishing everyone a bon dì, which is a Sicilian term that means have a good day, have a good day. Because if I say buongiorno, that's daytime. If I say buonasera, it's the evening. So you can watch this and play along with this any time of the day or the evening, whenever you like. And remember, my main purpose is to try to get you onto the right path of learning about Italian wines. And I think even if you're on the wrong path, it's a lot of fun just trying to get on the right path. So we're going to have some fun today because we're going to be in the most important area of Italy in the northeast. The region we'll be dealing with is Veneto. And Veneto's number one in production of Italian wines. And we left off last time with Lugana. Lugana is a white wine. We mentioned it was from Lombardy, but it's actually on the border of Lombardy and Veneto. So it's in both regions. And there are several wines that are like this. The one that jumps out at me is Orvieto. Orvieto is a wine, a white wine. And you'll find it on the border of Umbria and Lazio. So these wines actually predate the existence of Italy as a country when it was divided into 20 regions. So quite an interesting thing, at least interesting to me. I don't know if it's interesting to you. But I call Veneto the school at wines, and I'll go over that in a second. It's sort of the today region of Italy. All the latest technological things that go on in the wine business take place in the Veneto region. And I'll go over a few of those things with you now because you should know that each area has its own distinct personality, but there's a commonality in the Northeast to the culture of the Veneto area. There are three important areas in the Northeast, okay, of Italy, and one is Veneto, which is around the major city of Venezia, of Venice. And I must add that if you get a chance, scoot over to Verona. You can take a train from Venice to Verona. Verona is a very good wine town, and actually it's starting to surpass Venezia in population. It'll never pass it up in tourist attraction because Venice is so unique. But Verona is beautiful also. It has an arena that goes back to Roman times. They do live opera there in the summer. And if you go right outside of Verona, you come to Lake Garda. And Lake Garda is the largest lake in Italy. We're in lake country here, and the lakes have a big effect on the microclimates in the production of the wines of the area. I want to point out some things that makes the Veneto area called the school of Italian wines. Okay, first of all, there is a nursery, a grapevine nursery called Rochedo. Rochedo is the name of a town in Friuli. Now, Friuli Venezia Giulia is the full name, but we give it the nickname Friuli. We just call it Friuli. Friuli is east of Venice, east of the Veneto, and Rochedo is a town in Friuli. And there is a nursery there called Rochedo Vivae. Vivae is like a nursery, means a nursery. And this nursery was started in 1920 because Italy was just getting over the invasion of the phylloxera louse that virtually destroyed every vine in Italy. And they had to develop a science to graft the vines of Italy onto American rootstock because the American rootstock was immune to the louse. And that's where Rochedo came in 1920. There are thousands of scientists and craftsmen there that graft vines, 80 million vines grafted per year, and they investigate wine diseases. And Rochedo now has branches in 35 different wine producing countries. So it's the largest nursery in the world, and it's just devoted to trying to do good things with regard to grafting Italian vines on American rootstocks and better vines, making better clones. And again, Italy, I like to point this out because Italy is in the forefront scientifically, and sometimes we forget that. So this nursery is extremely important. Okay. Also, the largest wine fair, I believe it's the largest wine fair in the world, takes place every spring in Verona. And I may have mentioned this earlier, but Venice is, of course, the main tourist attraction in the area, and you have to spend time in Venice. It's such a unique city. But you may want to take a short train ride to Verona. Verona has an arena, a sort of Roman Colosseum, goes back to Roman times. I remember people telling me it was a bomb shelter in the Second World War. So it's a very formidable place. And in the evening, in the summertime, they do operas, live operas. The La Scala company from Milan comes and they do live operas in the Arena di Verona. And it's really worth going to see. Well, I'm an opera fanatic, so, you might not really like opera that much, but if you go to one, you're really going to love it because they do them at night and they give everybody a candle. And when it gets dark and they start to do the opera, everyone lights their candles. So you have 20, 30,000 people in the arena watching live opera at candlelight. It's really a beautiful thing. And when you're in Verona, you go a little bit west of Verona, you come to Lake Garda. And Lake Garda, this is lake country. North of Italy has several great lakes. Lago di Seo, we probably mentioned Lago Maggiore when we talked about Piemonte. And now you have Lake Garda, which is the biggest lake of all. And it starts down south, sort of near Verona, and works its way all the way up to Trento. And it's a beautiful place. A lot of wine towns there as well. A lot of entertainment. There's Gardaland, which is almost like a Disney World. And families go to Gardaland all the time. Okay. This wine fair in Italy takes place in Verona in the spring. 2024. I don't have the figures from 2020, but 2024, there were 97,000 attendees. This is a monstrous wine fair. And if you want to start a wine company, give me a call. We'll go to Vin Italy and we'll find enough wines to create a wine company for you. Because that's what I did for 35 years, working for different companies. I would go to Vin Italy and try to find wines, or follow up on wines that I had read about. So again, you have Rochedo Vivae, which is a nursery, biggest one in the world, and you have the biggest wine fair in the world, both in this Veneto, Tre Venezia area. Also, traveling a little outside of the Venice area, you come to a place where they make wine barrels. It's called Garbellotto, which is a family name. And I'm pretty sure it's the biggest one in Italy. They make largely what we call botti grandi. These are large casks, usually made of oak. They can be of chestnut, they can be of other woods, but they're usually made of oak. Very big, very thick oak. And I know that in the Guinness Book of Records, the largest barrel was made by Garbalotti It was 674 hectoliters. I think it took 40 people a really long period of time to make it. Actually, 50 coopers to make it. It holds the equivalent of 90,000 bottles. So this is Garbellotto. They also get involved in barrique, smaller oak barrels. Some of the oak barrels in Italy, the smaller ones, come from Hungary. They come from France, even from the United States. So it's very cosmopolitan business. But the famous barrel company in Italy, which was founded in 1775, Giuseppe Garbellotto and his family started making barrels for, at that time, the French people and for the Austrians who controlled Italy. Italy didn't become a country till 1861. So this business predates Italy. You should also know that the Italians age wines in stainless steel, in glass-lined tanks, also in amphora. Amphoras can be made of terracotta or ceramic. Most of them are terracotta. And this is a science that came using the amphoras, came from ancient Greece, but in modern times from a part of what used to be Russia called Georgia, Russian Georgia. It's where Stalin came from. So it's all interconnected. It's really, really interesting, I think. Also, what else is there about the school of Italian wines? There are two great schools in the area of Alto Adige, and we'll speak about that in a second. One is the school in Conegliano. It's called the Conegliano Enological School. And this was started in 1876 by the King of Italy, because he realized that if Italy was going to develop a wine trade, they had to have their own graduate school of studies. And so that's when that started. And there's another school up there called San Michele all'Adige. I do like to point out, in memory of a great old friend of mine, Bill Bonetti, William Bonetti. William Bonetti was from the area around Conegliano, and he came to the United States and he settled in Paterson, New Jersey. And he went with Hubert Opici from Opici Wines to California. And he worked for Opici Winery, later worked for Gallo. He worked for Cresta Blanca, which was a very important winery. We don't know much about it today, but was very important. Then he took a job at Charles Krug Winery. And the person who hired him at Charles Krug was Robert Mondavi. Okay, so Bill Bonetti died fairly recently. He was in his 90s when he passed away. And he's considered probably the elite producer of Chardonnay wine, because he became the head winemaker at Sonoma-Cutrer in the 1980s, and he worked there for the rest of his career. He was a wonderful person, and again, he studied in Conegliano. That's where he studied. That's where he got his degree. Again, trying to point out that northeastern Italy is the school of Italian wines. It's the place, it's the in place to be. Okay? And keeping that in mind, I would like to say a couple of things about the Veneto region. I already mentioned that it was number one region in production. And you're going to hear the names of a few Italian wines that are household terms for Italian wines. Wines like Prosecco. Prosecco comes from Veneto. Wines like Soave. Soave is one of the most important white wines in all of Italy, probably in all of the world. It's named for a village in Veneto, east of Lake Garda, and they use the Garganiga grape there, Garganiga grape, to make Soave. We'll be talking about Soave in a second. It's also an area for Pinot Grigio. Pinot Grigio del Veneto is probably the largest production of Pinot Grigio. Now they have Pinot Grigio they call Pinot Grigio della Venezia. And I'll just explain that briefly to you. This northeastern part of Italy, we have three regions, right? We have Veneto, which we just mentioned. We have Alto Adige, which I alluded to. Alto Adige is north of Veneto region, goes all the way up to Austria. Sometimes it's called the South Tyrol, the Sud Tyrol. And it was part of Austria until after the First World War. That's when it became part of Italy. And it's really interesting. We'll talk about them in the next class. But when you go there, the signs on the roads and the signs in the towns and the names of the towns, etc., are both in German and in Italian. So Bolzano, which is an important town up there, becomes Bozen in German. And you see the signs in both languages. And it's an autonomous region and very distinctive. This combination of Austrian, Germanic culture and Italian culture. Okay, and beautiful wines. Although they do produce a lot of red wines, they're known more for their whites. We'll get to that next class. Then east of there, toward what used to be Yugoslavia, is the region of Friuli, Venezia, Giulia, also very well known for some of the best white wines in Italy, and they produce good reds there as well. We'll be doing that in the next class. But if you take all three of these regions, Veneto, Alto Adige, and Friuli, all three of them, that's the Tre Venezia. And you'll see Pinot Grigio della Venezia, which means that the Pinot Grigio grapes come from any one of those or combination of those three regions. Okay, it's sort of a catch-all of grape varieties that grow in all three regions. In fact, with regard to Pinot Grigio, I will hold this up and we'll go on to this. Hopefully we'll get better pictures. We'll get a map for you and stuff like that. But this Pinot Grigio says Pinot Grigio Rosé, Pinot Grigio della Venezia. It says Rosé. The Pinot Grigio grape is pink. It's a gray Pinot. It's a pink Pinot. How do you get white wine from a grape variety that's pink? You pull off the free run juice of the grape, which is clear. So when you pull it off the skins, it doesn't have contact with the skins. It doesn't pick up that grayish pink pigmentation. That's why it's clear. So the famous one is Santa Margherita Pinot Grigio from Alto Adige, clear Pinot Grigio. The one that we showed you here, the Santa Silvana, is a rosé. So there's contact with the skins, maybe 24 hours of contact. And while I have it, I just wanted to show you this is available in a screw cap. And for a lot of the white wines of Italy, especially, some reds as well, but mostly whites and rosés, you have screw caps instead of corks. This is not a problem at all. It's a very good seal and it's easier to open. It's a little less expensive in the long run. My objection is that very often they're aluminum, and I don't like anything aluminum, anything plastic, because they're toxic. But that is not related to the quality of the closure. Okay, so you'll see a lot of Italian wines with screw caps. Okay, we'll talk about corks in a little while, but at any rate, for now, we'll abandon the Pinot Grigio. I do want to let you know, though, some people in Alto Adige call the Pinot Grigio the Ruländer grape, because that's the German word for Pinot Grigio. It's the Ruländer. Okay, but Pinot Grigio is part of the Pinot family. Pinot Bianco, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Noir, Pinot Nero. It gets its name because the cluster is shaped like a pine cone. Pinot, pine cone. Okay, and I mentioned Soave earlier. Let me show you a Soave. This is a nice Soave from Inama. Inama is a family producer of Soave. And on the Soave, it says Classico. Okay, Classico is a original delimited zone where the wine came from. Eventually, as a wine gets popular, it outgrows its zone, the original zone, and the lands around the original zone are entitled to call their wines Soave. We see Classico with regard to a lot of Italian wines. Most famous is Chianti Classico. Okay, it's a legal geographic designation. Indicates that it was the original area where the wine came from. So Soave, around the town of Soave, east of Lake Garda, there is a Classico zone there. And Inama makes a very fine Soave Classico from the Garganiga grape. How much Soave is produced? 3.5 million cases a year on average. It's an awful lot. It was popular in the United States many years ago. The first popular white wine from Italy in the United States was Verdicchio, which you may see in the amphora bottle. We'll talk about that when we get to Marche. That's where Verdicchio comes from. Okay, then Soave became popular. Frascati became popular, white wine from just outside of Rome. But now the most popular is Pinot Grigio, and much of that comes from the Veneto area. In addition to Soave, there's also Prosecco. Prosecco is the name of the town not far from Trieste in northeastern Italy. And that's where the wine gets its name, from the town of Prosecco. And this is a Prosecco Rosé. The basic grape variety is Glera, which is a white grape. It's a clear grape. But if you add a little Pinot Noir to it, you wind up with Prosecco Rosé. And there are a couple of red grapes that are permitted, but the most common is the Pinot Noir in it. So, very popular wine from the Veneto region. How popular? 51.4 million cases produced on average. Okay? Even Lugana, we mentioned Lugana, and probably really never heard of Lugana until I mentioned it. There are over 2 million cases of Lugana produced. Italy is a monster in this Veneto area, producing large quantities of wine. Altogether, 132 million cases of wine. And remember, this is the region of Marco Polo. These are great merchants with great schools, great nurseries, etc. Burton Anderson, who was a leading expert in Italian wine, still is, as a matter of fact, wrote a great book called Vino, called this Three Venice area the sunny side of the Alps. Okay, so it's just south of Switzerland, just south of Austria. It's in the eastern part of Italy, and it's an area that you really should go to if you're interested in wine. Go to one Vinitaly. I've been to about 35 of them, and I recommend that you go, because this is a real crossroads section, this northeastern Italy section. I also want to mention that they grow not only indigenous Italian grapes in this area, but they work with French varietals as well, and work with some varietals from other parts of the world. For example, they originated in France, but Carmenere, which is very important in Chile, they grow Carmenere in northeastern Italy. I mentioned Inama, who produces a Pinot Grigio. They also produce an excellent red Carmenere, and Malbec, which is a blending grape variety in Bordeaux and so popular in Argentina. Italians in the Northeast are growing Malbec as well. Okay, so again, we're putting in a good plug for the Veneto area, and I think you should try to get there. And if you get to Venice, try to spend a little extra time getting into the wine country outside the great city of Venice. And what I'd like to do is spend a bunch of time on one of Italy's most important wines, which is Valpolicella. Okay, Valpolicella and Bardolino are two towns in Veneto. Bardolino's right on Lake Garda, and Valpolicella is in the hills outside of Lake Garda area. And I love the name. Valpolicella means the Valley of Many Cellars. Valpolicella. And they produce a series of wines which are extremely interesting. You have regular Valpolicella. Here's a Ventale of Valpolicella from Santi. Santi is actually located in Bardolino. What often happens in this area is a producer will produce Soave, Bardolino, and Valpolicella, and probably Pinot Grigio as well. Okay, they produce an assortment of wines. Okay, and this is a Valpolicella, and the term superiore is important. A superiore wine, okay, is a wine that exceeds the regular standards of the wine for alcohol and longevity. So whereas a regular Valpolicella might be 11%, which is permitted by the Ministry of Agriculture, a superiore will be 12% or 12.5. And superiore can apply to many different Italian wines. So you have Frascati, white wine from Rome. And then you have Frascati Superiore, a little more formidable, a little more alcohol, a little more potential for aging. Okay? It's only superior if you think it's superior. You determine that. But the term itself means that it reaches a higher level of alcohol, a higher level of body. Okay, and they call this Ventale, which is very common for Valpolicella wines because there are so many Valpolicellas that producers like to apply a specific trademark name. And it's called Ventale because the Santi people feel this comes from vineyard areas which are ventilated. The wind gets through, the vento, the wind gets through it, so they call it Ventale. And this is a reasonably priced wine. You can find it probably in the teens and in a wine shop. You can find Valpolicella for $10, a little bit more than $10. But I want to show you a wine from Dal Forno, which is a Valpolicella Superiore, just like the Ventale, but this one is $100 a bottle. Okay, why is that? Because in every geographic area, there are a small group of really collectible producers that don't produce a lot of wine, but they produce epitomes of the grandeur of what the wine is. You might spend $500 on a bottle of Amarone from Dal Forno. And again, it'll have a little more alcohol than regular Valpolicella. This one is 14.5. And I can tell you, this is a 2012, and here we are in 2025. This is still a baby. These wines will age for 10, 15 years without a problem. Regular Valpolicella, you probably would want to age just for a couple of years. You want to enjoy them when they're young. But in every area, there are high quality producers, and they're worth the search. And one thing I tell my friends is that, all right, you don't want to go spend $100 on a Romano dal Forno Valpolicella, but maybe 5 of you can chip in $20 each, and you each get a glass to try. Okay, because it's an experience. Okay, you're not going to do it every night, so I recommend people pooling their resources together and getting a nice bottle of wine, a collectible bottle of wine. Okay, another variation of Valpolicella is Amarone. Technically, Amarone, the etymology of it means big and bitter. It's not really bitter. In fact, it's syrupy, it's big, it's rich, it's round tasting. But there's another wine called Ricciotto della Valpolicella, which is sweet. And Amarone is a drier version of that. Okay? And it's made with dried grapes. This is called the passito process. Okay? Where they dry the grapes in racks. They use plastic racks now. They used to use bamboo racks, but bamboo can become infested with insects and things, and insects are smart enough to avoid plastic. I'm trying to avoid plastic myself, but at any rate, if they put the grapes on these plastic mats under the roof of the winery, they can age those grapes, and the grapes start to shrivel up. Sometimes they attract the molds. A noble rot mold makes them even more precious. And they open the windows of the wineries at night and let the air come in from Lake Garda. And this adds to the drying and the moldy aspects that they look for in this passito process, using dried grapes to make Amarone. It's very expensive to produce, and I'll talk about that in a second. It used to be called Amarone della Valpolicella. It's a variation of Valpolicella. And this wine was commercialized for the first time at the Santa Sofia winery. An old friend of mine made the wine. Nino Franceschetti was the first one to get involved. In fact, he worked for the Mazzi company at one time making Amarone wine. And this is a collectible wine, something that you should search out. And we'll speak a little more about Amarone when we get to collectible wines toward the end of our sessions. And this is from Costa Serra. Costasera is the name of the vineyard area where the wine is from. And Mazzi is a wonderful family winery owned by the Boscaini family, and they're one of the best producers of Amarone. Okay. Amarones are aged at least 2 years, sometimes 4 years. This one's a 2018, so it's already 7 years old. Bertani, which is one of the big names in Amarone, ages their Amarone for up to 10 years. So the wines are kept in the cellars, and every year it's aged, they can't sell the wine until they bottle it and put it out in the market. So they may have 5, 6 different, 7 different vintages of the same wine in their cellar. So it's going to be expensive. It's a wine where you need a banker, to get into that wine business, but well worth the search. And the last wine I'm going to speak to you about today is called the Ripasso. And Ripasso is a very interesting wine. Ripasso della Valpolicella is the name of the wine, and this is one called Solane from Santi. Ripasso means to pass over again. And the process is very interesting. I'll try to explain it briefly. Okay? Remember, you make Valpolicella wine, you make all wines in the autumn. That's when you collect the grapes. That's when you press the grapes and you make the wine. So by the early spring, Valpolicella wine is ready to be sold. At the same time, the Amarone is made from dried grapes. Those grapes sit for a longer period of time, and the Amarone wine is not crushed until the spring. Okay? So now the Amarone wine is crushed, and they take the juice and they put it in barrels. And what do they do with all the skins and all the pits? They put it back into the Valpolicella wine, which is already made, and it starts a secondary fermentation. And this is how you get Ripasso della Valpolicella. So it's partially Valpolicella wine, fruity, fresh, lovely, but in contact with the lees of the Amarone. So it picks up that body. It picks up some of the big, rich quality of Amarone. And this, again, was created by the same person, Nino Franceschetti. And Ripasso Valpolicella is, I call it a poor man's Amarone, because you might pay $50, $75, $100 for a bottle of Amarone. You can usually find a Ripasso for $20, $30 or so. And all of the major producers of Amarone produce a Ripasso, and it's well worth your investigation. Okay, so to fill in the blanks of some of the things that I've said already about Valpolicella wine, we mentioned there was a Classico zone for Soave. There's also a Classico zone for Valpolicella. And the Classico zone consists of 5 villages: Fumane, Marano, Negrar, Sant'Ambrogio, and San Pietro in Cariano. And these are between Verona and Lake Garda, little wine towns in the Classico zone. There's also a zone called Valpantena. That's where Bertani is located. And so they have a special DOC there. Okay, Valpolicella wine. Total production is 1,600,000 cases. So this is a large production wine. Okay. As far as Ripasso and Amarone go, the Ripasso is not a large production. Amarone has increased in production because there's tremendous demand for it. 1,500,000 cases of Amarone wine. Okay. Air dried from dried grapes. Must be aged a minimum of 2 years, and the Amarone Reserve is aged for 4 years. Sometimes people refer to Bardolino and Bardolino and Valpolicella as the 2 gentlemen of Verona after the Shakespeare play, because Bardolino produces a lighter, fresher kind of wine. They also produce a rosé, which is called Chiaretto. And they produce a wine very young and fresh called the Vino Novello. And the Vino Novello is similar to the Beaujolais Nouveau that comes out in the fall before the rest of the wines are introduced. I used to have Vino Novello at Thanksgiving time with turkey. It's a very good match with turkey. Okay, and that's a wine you want to enjoy young. Whereas the Amarone and Ripasso you can age for a decade or 2 decades, especially the Amarone. Not so much the Ripasso, but especially the Amarone. Okay, so that is all I really intended to say about the Veneto area. There are so many other good wines from Veneto. Bianco di Costosa, Gambellara, etc. But I think if you're just starting to explore wines, if you stick to Valpolicella and the variations of Valpolicella, and you stick to Pinot Grigio, both the clear Pinot Grigio and the pink Pinot Grigio, and you stick to Prosecco. They're all different levels of production of Prosecco. And if you stick to these wines and you stick to Soave, a handful of wines, you'll get a good handle on the wines of the Veneto and come to a deeper appreciation of the quality of northeastern Italy. And in our next class, we'll speak about Alto Adige, okay, also called the South Tyrol, okay, Trentino Alto Adige. Trento is a beautiful town, which is sort of the border, the southern border of Alto Adige. Speak about that, and we'll speak about Friuli, Venezia, Giulia. Okay, so until we see you next time, let me just say ciao and uh, get into the wine shops, look at the Italian sections. If you have any questions, phone them in, call them in, write them in. I'll be happy to try to make up answers for you. Okay, and we're almost done with Northern Italy. After we do Friuli and we do Alto Adige, we'll do Emilia-Romagna, and that'll be the last region in the north, and then we'll head to the center and the south. Okay, there's an awful lot to talk about, so we take small sips and try to learn about Italian wines a little bit at a time. Okay, so stay well. Look forward to seeing you at the next session.